This is all wrong. I shouldn't be watching Watch Lab. I should be watching the popular YouTube watch channels where rich guys tell you to buy watches they get for free. Yet Watch Lab comes to us young people for hope. How dare you? Lithium batteries are dying. Scratched mineral crystals are cracking. Watch Lab has stolen my childhood and dreams with its empty words of $300 Casios with solar and Bluetooth and sapphire crystals. How dare you?
Okay, let's not be ridiculous. I didn't steal Greta's childhood and my words aren't empty. This Casio Edifice has an MSRP of $300. It has Bluetooth, radio control, solar, a sapphire crystal, and features up the yin-yang. All this watch goodness is packed into a wafer-thin 9mm case. No other major brands make a watch that has comparable specs to this watch at this price point. I've named this model of Casio Edifice the Cherry Blossom after the famous Japanese cherry blossom tree. The name is an allusion to the watch that the cherry blossom borrows heavily from, which is named after a tree, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. The Royal Oak is a famous Swiss sports watch that retails for only $32,000. The Cherry Blossom is in Casio Edifice's line of watches. There are 51 edifices. This is way too many edifices for my comfort. There is too much overlap in their features, and this is going to confuse consumers. My advice to people interested in buying an edifice is to only buy an edifice that has both solar power and a sapphire crystal. This is Celine. How you doing? Celine will be our model. I like to use Celine because his wrists are exactly 7 inches. The Edifice has its own tin that is shaped differently and is way cooler than the G-Shock tin. The Edifice tin has rivet-like indents at the top. The Cherry Blossom comes with a card that has QR codes to download the smartphone app on your iPhone or Android device. You'll need to register the watch with your smartphone to use the smartphone app. The watch also comes with a miniature stand-up information card, an FCC statement, a Casio module number 5604 manual, a solar usage guide, a warranty, and a weird warning telling me that if I don't remove the sticker from the back of the case of the watch, that this may result in rust and skin irritation. The Cherry Blossom is a solar-powered quartz watch. It should run for many years as long as it has enough light to charge up its power cell. If the watch is not exposed to enough light to recharge its power cell, the watch will have enough energy in its power reserve to run for 5 months. If you stick the watch into a desk drawer for a while so that it's in total darkness, it'll go into low power mode and will continue to run for 19 months. I knew that Casio was going to cut some corners with the Cherry Blossom. All watchmakers at the under $500 price point do, though some do a lot more than others. For Casio to throw in such powerful features into the Cherry Blossom and price it so cheaply, I feared the worst. Before I cover the case of the Cherry Blossom and show you some of the watch's features, I'm going to cover the bracelet, clasp, and loom, as this is where most of the cost cutting was done. Like the full metal G-Shock, the Cherry Blossom's links are connected via spring bars. Spring bars can be a little challenging to size, especially when you're not used to them. However, they're the best system for sizing a watch that I've come across. The width of the Cherry Blossom's links are 3 millimeters, which is thin. This is in keeping with the Cherry Blossom's very thin case. The quality of the links of the Cherry Blossom is the most controversial issue of this watch. This is a G-Shock full metal link. It is one solid piece of metal, as one would expect. The Cherry Blossom's links appear to be made out of metal sheets, one inside the other, that were pressed together to form an individual link. I expected that the Cherry Blossom would have solid links. Pressed metal links are something that one usually sees in watches costing about $30 or less. The Cherry Blossom links are at least partially hollow and they feel really light. It seems as though if I squeeze the links hard enough that I might be able to crush them. I'm not going to test this theory out, as I need to recoup at least part of my investment of this watch by reselling it. Unsurprisingly, the end links are clearly hollow. You'll see hollow end links a lot at this price point, especially from major brands, and I don't think hollow end links are that big a deal. Will these pressed metal links stand up to a lot of stress? Will they start to come apart or deform after long-term use? I honestly don't know. The Cherry Blossom seems to be designed for more casual use, even though Casio bills the Cherry Blossom as a hardcore activewear watch. Personally, I would have no hesitation about wearing this watch unless I were doing very vigorous physical activity. The good news about the bracelet is that it's flexible, smooth as hell, and like the case, finished very smoothly and nicely. The bracelet starts off at 22 millimeters in width, tapers down to 20 millimeters, and is 21 millimeters at the clasp. You'll see bracelets with better taper, but the bracelet actually feels really good because of its smoothness and lightness. The lightness really goes a long way in making the bracelet feel less cumbersome. The end links have a pivot on them, which helps the watch anchor to the wrist better. I give the bracelet a B on integration with the case. Casio did a good job of making the brushing of the bracelet consistent with the case. My main complaint is that the steep slope on the lugs doesn't carry over to the end links. A more minor issue is that the end links don't line up exactly with the lugs. The bracelet is very rattly. The rattliness doesn't bother me, though it is going to bother some people. I've only encountered 3 watches this year that had clasps that I would say were good. While I wouldn't consider the Cherry Blossom's clasp as good, it's not the utter warmed over crap of most watches in the under $500 price range. A big problem with the Cherry Blossom's clasp is that it has only 2 micro adjusts. Having only 2 micro adjusts reduces the probability of the watch fitting properly. Why give people only 2 micro adjusts when you could give them 4? I really like inverted push button clasps as they're low profile. The scissor is made of thin metal. I don't think it's a big deal. The scissor isn't going to break as long as you're careful putting the watch on and off. The scissor has nice smooth edges. It's not going to scratch you. My main gripe about this clasp is that there is too much clearance at the end of the clasp. I can stick an entire toothpick into here. Since the metal of the gap edge hasn't been smoothed, you run the risk of either scratching yourself or someone else when wearing the watch. Casio could have and should have done a better job with this clasp. I'm giving the Cherry Blossom Lume a D. The lume allows the watch to be readable for about 3 hours in total darkness. The indexes fade well before the hands. The lume is pretty unacceptable. For $300, consumers deserve better lume. This is just pure nickel and diming. The Cherry Blossom is a big watch, and it's not very ergonomic flat case design makes the watch feel every big as its specs. The lug to lug is 50 millimeters. This is at least 2 millimeters longer than it should be if we were living in a normal universe. The watch's diameter of about 43 millimeters, which is pretty large in itself, is misleading. Because of the watch's bump on the opposite side of the case and the long, bulky crown guards, which limit the range of your wrist, I think a more realistic measure of the watch's diameter should be measured with the crown. This puts the diameter at about 46.5 millimeters, which is fairly insanely big for normal human beings. The Cherry Blossom's largeness is mitigated somewhat by its lightness and thinness. However, it wears very big. The watch is 119 grams with 3 links removed for my wrist, which is a little over 7 inches. I'm comfortable wearing this watch, though I do need to accept a slight limitation in my horizontal range of motion while wearing it. In order to keep this video from running too long, I'm not going to go into detail on the extraordinary job Casio did on the finishing of this case. Polishing is used sparingly in certain places to give the watch a hint of class and to complement the brushing. The majority of the case is brushed, giving the watch an overall tooly vibe. I think you would be really hard-pressed to find a watch under $500 that comes close to the Cherry Blossom's workmanship and design. The crown is a little slippery, but you're probably never going to be rotating the crown, as the watch automatically sets itself to the correct time 4 times a day via Bluetooth connectivity with your phone, as well as once a day with GPS, which automatically sets the watch to the correct time zone. The watch has a perpetual calendar, so you'll never have to worry about setting the date, even on leap years. And the watch automatically sets itself to the correct time when going in and out of daylight savings time. This watch literally sets itself. The case back is utilitarian, which is typical of Casio. What surprises me about the case back is that it lacks indentations for it to be screwed off. This, for lack of better words, plank that extends from the case back suggests to me that this is a pop-off case back, which would be unusual, as you usually only see pop-off case backs on very cheap watches. Casio rates the cherry blossom as having 100 meters of water resistance, so you should be able to swim with this watch even if it does have a pop-off case back. The pushers are nicely sized and have good action. The crown as well as the bottom pusher are lightly signed. The flat, non-reflective coated sapphire crystal is set above the stationary bezel, as I like, as this means the sapphire will bear the brunt of many impacts. The sapphire won't scratch, but the beautifully brushed steel bezel will. The dial of the watch is every bit as pretty as the case. The dial has a grainy wood-like background, like the brushing of the fixed bezel. The indexes would be perfect if they weren't a little too shiny. I don't like the distraction of bling in watches. The logo occupies a little too much dial real estate for my tastes, but I don't think it's a huge deal. The date is recessed too deep in the dial, which makes it difficult to read from angles. When I first saw the watch, I thought the handset, which is reflective, was too small. After spending time with the watch, I now believe the handset is perfectly sized for a dial that has a lot of subdials. The hands are just big enough to not obscure the subdials too much, yet large enough to be read with ease. The second hand is hitting the marks a little sloppily. It's off a little on some indexes. I'm not too bothered by this, though some people might be. This subdial is a 24-hour dial. It's marked very poorly with just a crosshair which divides this clock into quadrants. The subdial is too small to eyeball the time. It needs to be marked a little better so that one can obtain the 24-hour time with a quick glance. This subdial is a case of form with very little function. This is poor engineering. This subdial here is the second time zone clock. I have mine set to Moscow time. I find the green hour hand of this dial very helpful, as it helps to guide my eye to the hour hand. The cherry blossom is a 24-hour chrono. Yes, you heard that right. The second time zone dial also doubles as a 24-hour elapsed time counter for the stopwatch, which I'll demonstrate later. There is a tiny AM/PM subdial squeezed between the second time zone dial and the green bordered dial at the bottom. It's easy to get disoriented when you're flying long distances from one airport to another, and I'm grateful for a subdial like this, though I could also tell whether it's AM or PM from the 24-hour subdial, so one could argue that this subdial is redundant. This big subdial at the bottom with the thick green beveled area at the top has several functions. On the left half of the subdial hand points to the current day. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are marked by a dot. The other days are marked by their first letter, indicating the day of the week. The markings are small and hard to read, but I suspect that once you've used the watch for a while, you'll be able to tell the day of the week from the angle of the subdial hand alone. I'm not going to cover the markings on the right half of this subdial, as this has to do with lap timing, and I'm not going to be covering this topic as it's just too much to cover. The printing on the subdials is embossed. The subdials have different textures from the wood grain-like dial background. The top 3 subdials have spiral backgrounds, and the bottom subdial has a plain background. It's small details like this that really make this watch stand out as something that is very professionally made. The dial is very readable and sexy. I think the green on the dial is a nice touch as it helps your eye hone in on what you're looking for. In the interest of keeping this review from going too long, I'm just going to show you the features of the watch that I think people will use the most. The two major features that I'm excluding are the alarm and the lap timer. Pressing the top pusher will put me in stopwatch mode. Notice how the hand of the second time zone subdial goes to 0. The second time zone subdial is now acting as a 24-hour elapsed time count. I can stop the stopwatch by pressing the top pusher. Notice the annoying beep sound. It does that every time you press the top pusher. I know of no way to prevent this annoying beep. You continue the stopwatch by pressing the top pusher again. I can reset the stopwatch by pressing the top pusher to stop the stopwatch and then pressing the bottom pusher. Pressing the bottom pusher again will set the watch back to regular time mode, which Casio calls calendar mode. You'll need to use the Edifice app to obtain the charge level of your watch. Hold down the bottom pusher until the minute hand points to the green R near the 2 o'clock index twice. Your phone will make a connection with your cherry blossom. The charge level will appear here in the app. Make sure the Edifice app is running. Hold down the bottom pusher until the second hand points to the green R 3 times. The phone's ringtone will sound shortly. The cherry blossom should automatically adjust the time to the time zone you're in when it does its GPS connection once a day. You can, however, manually set the time zone pretty easily using the app. The cherry blossom has 300 cities that you can set the time to. You can't set the home time, but you can set the world time and then swap the world time with the home time. So let's say I'm in Boston and I want to fly to Budapest. So I get on the plane, fly to Budapest, and when the plane has landed in Budapest and I'm waiting to deplane, with the app I set the world time to Budapest. Then I swap the world time with the home time. The cherry blossom's main dial adjusts to reflect Budapest local time. My world time, New York, shown in the secondary time zone subdial, will adjust to reflect New York time, which is 7 hours behind. The date of the watch will automatically shift to the next day, as it is the next day in Budapest relative to Boston time. The date change may take a minute or so, but it'll happen. My father gave me my first watch when I was about 6. I needed to wind it every day, it wasn't that accurate, and the acrylic crystal got really scratchy. The cherry blossom to me is like some futuristic technology conceived by the lofty imaginations of science fiction writers. Despite the cherry blossom's faults, this watch is simply too pretty and way too powerful not to love. Having the cherry blossom on my wrist literally makes me happy. I can't say that about most watches, even the two that I wear on a regular basis. If you're a fan of Watch Lab, I know you're special. Maybe as a child, you took special classes for the intellectually gifted. Or maybe, like me, you took special needs classes. Maybe you're in the special forces, in which case you probably took special needs classes. Whatever specialness you have, I know that you can think critically and freely enough to recognize the specialness of Watch Lab. I desperately need the help of my special viewers to keep the show running. I work for a living and don't get free watches to review. Please become my benefactor on Patreon. You'll receive production credit if you do, and it'll appear in the credits at the end of each video. If you cannot give me money, then please subscribe and give my videos a thumbs up. I'd like to thank all my producers for their generosity.